Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into a source text that a listener sent over. It's a single document, and it offers a really stark, um, deeply concerned perspective on Australia right now.
That's right. And it's important to note this isn't, a survey of different views. It's one specific, very strong voice. It lays out a whole series of deeply held beliefs, grievances too. A very singular landscape for us to explore.
Exactly. So our mission, really, for this deep dive is just to unpack the points made inside this particular text. We're treating the document itself as, well, the territory we're exploring, trying to understand the claims and the very specific viewpoint the author is putting forward.
And the tone hits you straight away. There's this feeling of intense frustration, a sense of being controlled, manipulated maybe, and a perceived disconnect from reality. The author really frames this quite pointedly as, quote, what Australians have become.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this perspective, just as the author presents it. The text seems to open with the author talking about feeling frustrated after some kind of meeting.
Yeah, feeling that external interference and what they actually call stupidity derailed the original point of the meeting, which, according to the text, was about finding a way for people to unite, to address perceived threats, threats to the country, values, way of life, health.
Right, but what's interesting is how quickly the author seems to jump from that personal experience to a much broader conclusion.
Exactly. They see it as a symptom of something bigger, believing Australians kind of generally are being, and these are the words used, controlled, manipulated, coercive, delusional, dino concept of reality, completely brainwashed. That really sets the stage for their, well, quite critical view of the general population that follows.
hmm And following directly from that, the text suggests that established political systems, they're not the answer. It explicitly says absolutely no party or politician is going to save us.
Which immediately brings up a key question within the source's own logic. If politics can't save them, well, where does the author think the answer lies? And this distrust, it goes further. The text also claims no police or army are going to protect us.
So it's a pretty wide net of suspicion the author is casting here. It also pulls in the medical profession. The text states, doctors and medical profession are all about jabbing you, so they certainly are working for the people who are intent on depopulation and destruction of Australia. That's a really direct and severe accusation laid out in the document.
Yes, absolutely. The author explicitly links the medical system, in their view, to intentional depopulation efforts.
Yeah.
And the text draws a conclusion from all this. It will take millions of Australians to stand up to this triinitial, communist military regime system.
Oh,
That's the powerful overarching label the author puts on the whole perceived system of governance.
triinitial communist military regime system. Wow, that's a profoundly strong way to put it. The author then seems to connect this belief back to their ancestors, people who fought in World War I and II for, as they describe it, a free way of life under a Western society.
Right, a way of life that text claims is now all but decimated.
And according to the source, this isn't seen as some accident or natural decline.
No, not at all. The text asserts, quite forcefully, they have destroyed everything good in Australia. They've infiltrated every part of our country to deliberately destroy it from the inside. So, the author presents this as a conscious, deliberate, internal act of sabotage.
Okay, so as the author builds this case within the text, they start listing off specific areas of concern, presented almost like evidence points for their view. Economic issues seem pretty prominent here. There are mentions of taxes, levies.
Yes, and the claim that stolen super on its way represents a threat to people's retirement funds.
Economic worries are definitely a major thread woven through this document.
Absolutely. The author highlights farmers losing all they ever known, businesses being, destroyed by taxes, and this leads directly, in the author's view, to what they just call inflation.
And there's a specific concern raised about sort of external economic influence, too.
Yes, China purchasing every piece of Australia that they can have, all commodities of every kind. That's flagged as a specific issue.
Okay, so moving on from the purely economic, the source puts a lot of focus on perceived threats to, well, fundamental rights and personal autonomy.
Right. Concerns are raised about what the author sees as direct threats to the right to eat meat and the right to use cash.
And these perceived threats, they seem connected in the text to the push for digital identification. The author expresses real alarm about forcing digital ID onto every Australian that's want to access social media,
Hmm.
and specifically mentions age assurance under 16ers as part of what they believe is a planned and implemented system of control.
So in this view, digital ID isn't just about modernization. It's seen as a tool for restricting access, for tracking people, especially younger Australians.
The idea of restricted movement comes up too.
Yes, the author claims there will be no travel, only the rich will travel, leading, they believe, to a two-tiered population, rich and poor, which will then be controlled by this communist regime and a army to enforce it.
And health concerns, they resurface later in the text too, don't they?
They do. There's a claim about chemtrails that are poisoning Australians and everything that these toxins fall down on. This really reinforces that idea of intentional harm we saw earlier. It links atmospheric trails directly to a belief that people are being poisoned from the air.
Right, tying back into that fundamental distrust of the systems, including the medical system mentioned before.
And the author perceives this kind of corruption reaching into education as well, stating, schools from preschool to universities are all corrupted and are indoctrinating children into total self-confusion. It's a really comprehensive picture of systemic failure and intentional manipulation as the author sees it, scanning just about every sector.
Let's maybe touch on how the author presents their own perspective within all this.
Well, they state quite clearly, I am outspoken, my morals and values have not been corrupted. So obviously, I am not able to be deceived or brainwashed.
Okay, so that highlights a real conviction in the text. The author believes their own viewpoint is based on uncorrupted morals, and therefore they see themselves as immune to the deception or brainwashing they perceive in others.
Exactly. It positions their perspective as, well, a source of clear-sighted truth, contrasting sharply with how they see other Australians. And the text is explicit about this perspective as being shared as truths in all caps.
Right. Then the source shifts gears slightly, moving to present these deeply held beliefs about specific actions the author considers absolute treason that has been committed by so many people in Australia.
That's a very, very serious accusation being made in this document. The author directly claims they have premeditated first-degree murder on our families and friends, and links that specifically to medically injured untold number of Australians.
So the author is presenting this as deliberate, intentional harm on a really massive scale.
Yes. And this leads into a particularly graphic and frankly disturbing claim regarding legislation. The author states, every state and territory have passed on live birth abortion in Australia is just the most evil thing to ever be passed by these criminals.
Wow.
The author describes this practice as they understand it and asserts that actual nurses have spoken up about this, presenting this as alleged evidence for the level of evil and criminality they believe is operating within the system.
And after laying all this out, the author concludes this section by putting the onus back on the reader.
Pretty much, stating, all of what I have put here can be researched. People just have to take the time. So placing the responsibility firmly on the reader to verify these really significant claims.
Okay. And finally, there's also a note of personal sort of weariness expressed in the document.
Yes, a sense of fatigue. The author states, I am at a point now where I am disgusted, been at this way before internet was around, and recalls being dismissed, called crazy, for holding these views, even in face-to-face conversations long before the internet era.
Right. So, okay, let's try and pull back from all those details for a moment. Let's summarize the key areas of concern and belief we've just explored in this deep dive purely as they're presented in this source text.
Okay.
There's that overarching sense of being governed by what the author labels a triinitial communist military regime.
Yes, definitely the headline. And this perceived regime is believed by the author to have infiltrated and corrupted basically all major institutions they describe. Government, political parties, the police, the army, the medical profession, even right down to the education system.
And economically, the concerns laid out span quite a range. Taxes, levies, that fear of retirement funds being, quote, stolen super, farmers and businesses being destroyed, inflation.
And that specific mention of external purchases of Australian assets, particularly by China, as described in the text.
Then central to the author's feeling of being controlled are those perceived threats to fundamental rights.
Yeah, things like eating meat, using cash, and that big focus on the push for digital ID, which the author explicitly links to age verification and restricting access, especially online.
And the health concerns too, jabbing, depopulation, chemtrails, they're all significant pieces of this worldview as presented here.
Right. And finally, those deeply held beliefs about treason and the really specific, quite heinous claims regarding legislation, the ones the author refers to as live birth abortion. Those round out this picture of intentional harm and destruction that the author believes is coming from within Australia's own systems.
So again, just to be absolutely clear for everyone listening, this deep dive was purely an exploration. We were looking at the specific claims and the specific perspective contained within the single source text provided by our listener.
Exactly. And what the text really highlights overall is this profound sense of loss. A loss of what the author sees as a Western society, a free way of life, core Australian values. And the author attributes this loss to deliberate internal destruction.
hmm And the source text, it does include a call to action, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests that if all freedom groups and fractions don't work out how to coexist with each other to save Australia, well, then they aren't really committed to freedom in the author's eyes.
Yeah, there's a very clear call for literally millions of people to stand up, to set aside egos, cooperate, and, quote, save Australia.
So connecting this back to you, the listener, understanding different perspectives, even ones that might feel challenging or vastly different from your own, it's a really crucial part of navigating the world of information today.
Absolutely. This text provides one very specific, very intense lens on a whole range of issues. It offers a stark view of Australia through this author's eyes.
So here's a final thought, drawing directly from the source's themes for you to maybe mull over. Given the author's explicit belief that established systems, government, parties, police, army, doctors simply cannot be trusted,
Right.
and that it will take millions of Australians to stand up,
Huh.
what does the source actually imply is the path forward for change?
And perhaps more importantly, what are the inherent challenges in trying to unite people around such, well, disparate and deeply held concerns as the ones laid out here?
The author leaves us with a final, quite striking thought and image right at the end of the text. Wake up, picture cricket lollies this.